Today we are covering accessibility in UI design, and it's a very important topic in UI design. So make sure that you make the notes of key points of your learning, otherwise you might forget some things. And we can start the video. And before starting the accessibility topic, let me show you a stat. Around 16% of world's population, which is 1.3 billion people, have some kind of disability. So a large portion of your user have some kind of disability. So you also need to consider those people when you are designing any app or website or any other product. Okay, let's start. Now accessibility simply means designing for people who have some special needs, like they might be having some physical disability or mental disability, or they might be in a special situation, or they have some special requirements, because disability is not permanent. Like we have three kind of disability: permanent, temporary, and situational. You can see the example of this thing. You can take the screenshot of this thing. Like if you take the example of touch, imagine if a person who have only one hand, so he will use any app or website with only one hand. Or in any situation, if you got injured, then in that case also the user can use only one hand, or you might be carrying something in your hand. So in these three conditions, the person is disabled either temporarily, permanently, or situationally. So you have to design your app according to these things. You can take the screenshot of this thing. Okay, now when we are designing for accessibility, it not only helps the disabled people, but it also helps normal people. Like let me show you a real life example. Like we just look at this. This is a ramp stairs. This is mainly designed for wheelchair, but normal people use this ramp stair a lot. Imagine if you're carrying something in your hand, you are carrying a trolley bag, then you can use this thing. Or even people use this thing to normally walk instead of the step stairs, they use the ramp stairs. So accessibility design helps everyone. So it's very important that you make your design accessible, because it makes the product overall easy to use for everyone. Okay, now the question is how to make your design accessible, and some examples of accessibility design. Starting with caption. Now caption was initially added for the people who cannot listen, or there is a language barrier. Like imagine if a video is in Spanish or Hindi, and then you can watch the video with the help of caption and you will understand the video perfectly. But as I said earlier, it also helps normal people. Like imagine if you are in a situation where there is a lot of noise, and if there is a part of video in which the pronunciation is not clear, in that case you can look at the caption and you will understand the video. Or the video phasing is too fast or too slow, then in that case also caption will help you a lot. Now next thing we have is the using icons, not just colors. Now icons will be very helpful for the people who have some kind of color blindness. Like if you just look at this example, in this the person cannot see colors, he will see only black and white things. He or she has to read that text to understand that this is the error. But if you add an icon, it will be easy for the user to understand that there is something wrong and he need to pay attention. It will be easy for the user to scan, and this will also help normal users to scan the application better, because majority of the time we scan our app or website to understand the content. If you add an icon, it will be very helpful for the user to understand that there is something wrong or any other kind of thing. I have shown you just an example of error, but you should always add icons. Like you can add icons in the email field also, so that user will understand more easily. Okay, next thing we have is the alt text. Now alt text means alternative text. It's the alternative text of an image. Now imagine if a blind person is using screen reader to read any paragraph or any website. In that case, the alternative text will be very helpful to understand the image. Like in this case, we have an alt text of image like cat resting on the floor with the collar, and this alt text is also available on the icons or any other UI element. Like in this, the alt text will be clap and comment and add to bookmark and read or share on menu. And alt text also help normal user, because if your internet is slow or the image is damaged for some reason, in that case the browser will not load the image. It will show the alt text, and you will be able to understand some context of the image with the help of the alt text. Okay, so it's a good idea to always add a alt text, and it's not possible to show alt text in UI design. You have to include that thing in the backend. So whenever you're designing an admin panel or anything which uploads the content, like in this case the upload blog page or the write blog page, in that you have to include a field above our image to add alt text. Next thing we have is color contrast. Now color contrast is one of the most important thing in accessibility design, and 90% of the website landing page fails on color contrast, because if you use color contrast properly, you might lose some beauty of your design. So it's very tricky to use color contrast to improve the design. And we have some accessibility standards when you are using color contrast. Like we have A, AA, AAA. Now A means low accessibility standard, and AA means high, and AAA means the max, and these are decided based upon the contrast ratio. Now contrast is mainly the difference between two things, like the color, like the background color might be white and the foreground color will be black. So they have a very big contrast ratio. And if you want to understand more about color, go watch the first video of this series about colors. In that I have explained in detail about how to use colors in UI design and all the properties of colors you should know as a beginner, and how to use color in UI design. Okay, now we have mainly three standards, like 2:1 ratio, 4.5:1 ratio, and 7:1 ratio. Now in UI design we mainly use AA and AAA. Okay, and to check the color contrast, we have a plugin in Figma. You can simply go to resources panel and search for the plugin contrast. Here we have the contrast plugin. Simply run it, and then you have to simply select any element. Like I'm selecting the label here. If I select it, Okay, we have the plugin here. If I select it, then it will show me the contrast. Now in contrast, we have three categories: the normal text, large text, and graphic text. Now normal text is the text smaller than 24 pixels. Like in this case, we have 14 pixels. It's a normal text, so it should pass a ratio of 4.5:1. It's passing the ratio, like you can see that here, but it's not passing the AAA standards, but it's completely okay. You can ignore that thing, but your design should pass the accessibility standard of AA. That will work fine. Next we have is the large text. Now large text is the text greater than 24 pixels or equal to 24 pixels, or a smaller text like 20 pixels, but they are bold. So the bold 24 pixel will be considered as a large text. It should pass accessibility standards of 3:1. You can see here, if you just hover over the element, it will show you the accessibility standard to contrast ratio. Next we have is the graphics. Now graphics mainly include the illustrations or the icons or the buttons we have. These things come under the category of illustrations or graphics. They should also pass a contrast ratio of 3:1, and managing the color contrast is simple if you work smartly. Like if you take your color palette, and if you don't know how to generate this color palette, go watch the first video of the series. In that I have explained in detail. Okay, you just have to pick any color, like simply select the label or any element and choose the eyedropper tool to pick the color. And I'm doing this thing for light theme. In dark theme you have to obviously pick the color from the top, but in this I will pick the color from bottom. So I will pick the 950. It's passing the contrast ratio. I can use this thing for the text. Okay, let me pick this. Okay, 900 also passing. Let me pick 600. Okay, it's also passing. Let me pick 500. It's also passing. Let me pick 400. So 400 is failing, so I have to stick to these colors. Like I can only use colors till 500 for the text or any other graphics, because it's passing the contrast ratio of 4.5:1 and 3:1 also. And if I select the button and I pick the color, if I pick the color, you can see that the plugin is not able to detect the contrast ratio. Although the contrast ratio is very good, but it's still not showing that. Now this is the limitation of this plugin. They might fix this thing in future, but for now it's not able to check the contrast ratio of some element. Now to check the contrast ratio of this thing, what you can do is simply draw a rectangle and pick the same color. That way it will show you the contrast ratio, and you can check if you can use this color or not. Okay, next thing we have is the text. Like, let me close it. If you just look at these two categories, like this is a sans serif font and this is a serif font. Now you should not use serif font like this serif font here. And if you don't know about fonts, go watch the video about typography. Link is in the description and in the I button. Now this is a serif font. You can tell that thing by the look. It contains pointed corners, so it's a serif font, and you should not use this thing because some people have difficulty in using this thing. Like if someone has dyslexia, then they will not be able to read this thing properly. Okay, because the weight is not constant. Like if you just look at the vertical bar and the horizontal bar, the weight or the thickness is different. So that makes it very hard to scan or read for some people who have some kind of mental health issue or some other kind of illness. So it's always a good idea to use a serif font. And the second thing is you should always increase the line height. If you just select this paragraph and if you click here on this line height option, by default it's set to auto, and every font has different line height. Like in this case we have 16. If you just click on it, it will show you the line height. And every font has different line height. Let me choose another font. Like this font has line height of 17 pixels. So you have to change the line height of the font you are using to make it more readable. Let me undo it and choose Roboto. Now the line height we should use it's around 130% to 150%. That's a good line height, and you should also not increase it too much because that way it will be very difficult to scan or read any paragraph. Like if you just type 150 here percent also, then it will change the line height to 150% for 14 pixels font size. Now what it's doing, it's calculating 150% of 14. Now to calculate the 150% of 14, yeah, you can either use a calculator or you can do basic math in Figma. Just click here and select all and delete. Simply press 1.5 because we want 150%, so we'll type 1.5. If you want 125%, you have to type 1.25 and simply multiply it by pressing Shift 8 for the star symbol. You can see that we have a star symbol, and then press 14. Then it will show you the line height is 21 pixels, and you should always give your line height in pixels, because if you use percentage in design for line height, like if I type 150% here, it will create some problem in development. So it's always a good idea to use pixels. You have to do this thing for every font. Like if the font size was 16 pixels, so I will simply change the line height. Simply go here, type 1.5 if I'm using 150% and type 16. Then the line height will be 24 pixels, and you can choose any line height between 130% to 150%. Don't go beyond that because that will be too much. And let me show you, like if I increase the line height, paragraph will not look like a paragraph. It will look like they are individual lines. So it's not a good idea to go beyond 150%. Let me undo it. And if you want to go below 130%, you can go up to 125% or 120% depending upon your font. but you should always increase the line height of your paragraph to make it more readable. Okay, next thing we have is the font size. The minimum font size for paragraph is 14 pixels. You should not go below 14 pixels because that will be very hard to read on screen. And for desktop version it's 16 pixels. You should avoid using paragraphs below 16% for the desktop version of the website, like the PC version of the website. The paragraph font size should be minimum 16 pixels. Okay, and the smallest size of font you should use in your design is 12 pixels for mobile design, like the application design or the mobile version of any website. And for paragraph it's 14 pixels, and for other small text you can use 12 pixels. Although in some cases you can use 10 pixels, but it's not recommended. You should try to stick to 12 pixels. And for PC it's 14 pixels. You should not go below 14 pixels for any kind of text. Make note of this thing, otherwise you might forget what I just said. Okay, and when it comes to the paragraph and the heading, like you can see in this case, there should be a visible difference. Like you should be able to tell by just look like this is a heading, this is a paragraph. For that, what you can do is you can either increase the font weight. If you're using medium for the paragraph, you can use bold for the heading, or you can use size. Like if you're using 14 pixels for your paragraph, you can use 16 pixels for the heading, or you can combine these things. Like you can give a 16 pixels bold heading and 14 pixels medium weight font size for the paragraph. Okay, next thing we have is the UX copy. Now UX copy is not exactly in accessibility design, but it's very important that you should keep your UX copy very simple. Now UX copy is the written text on the UI we have, like yes, cancel, or this heading or this paragraph. This is a UX copy. This is the written content of all the app or website. Now if you just look at this example, are you sure you want to cancel the transaction? Now we have two options, yes and cancel. Now this is very confusing, like the cancel button will cancel the transaction or this will cancel the action. So it's always a good idea to give simple or understandable UX copy, because majority of the people are not that much smarter. You should always try to keep the UX copy as simple as possible. Now to fix this thing, what you can do is you can simply change the UX copy. You can change the label to cancel and don't cancel. Now it's very clear. You can also change it to cancel transaction. That will be more easy, but this will also work fine. And next thing we have is the touch area. Like if you just look at this text, I have to tap exactly on this text, like the height is 20 pixels, only then the button will work. But if you just look at this example, like I have enclosed that thing in a container or the other frame, its touch area is 48 by 48 pixels. Now its touch area height is 48 by 54 pixels. Now the minimum touch area is 48 by 48 pixels, because our thumb size is also similar. Although you can easily touch elements who have smaller size than 48 pixels, but there are some situations or some kind of disability in which it will be difficult to touch a smaller element. Like if you are in a very crowded place and if you are not able to use your phone properly, your phone is shaking, then you will not be able to touch that thing properly. Or if any person has some kind of disability and it's shaking very much, then it will not be able to touch it properly, and it has to pinpoint on that thing to touch that thing. So it's always a good idea to increase the touch area. And to increase the touch area, you don't have to do anything. You have to tell your developer to increase the touch area. You can only give extra spacing in your design to increase the touch area. Like in this case, I have enclose that thing inside a frame. You can see that thing in a layers panel, like this is the button, like this is the text button, and I have enclosed that thing inside a container or a frame. So developer will assign a touch action to this whole container instead of this button, and it will be easy for the user to touch it. And the minimum gap between two elements which are clickable, it's 8 pixels. It always recommended, although you can reduce this gap to 0, but you should be very smart when you are doing this. Okay, these were some basic things about accessibility. There are advanced things. I will cover those things in future video, but for now these things are enough. And this was for this video. See you in next one. Bye.